watching Gearz, brought to you by LMC Truck. Keep them on the road.
You know, one thing that is almost always overlooked when people get into building custom vehicles is the fact that the little detail work a lot of times is more difficult and time-consuming than the big stuff. For example, stuffing another engine into a vehicle, that's pretty straightforward. But getting that engine all hooked up and working right, that's where all your time's gonna go. And that's why we get a ton of questions of people saying, what parts do I buy to do this? How do I make them all work together? And how do I modify them if I have to? Those are good questions. Because if you change the parameter of the vehicle at all, which is what we do, well, you can rest assured that those parts are probably not going to bolt right in. And the burden falls on you to make it all work. So that's what we're going to show you how to do today. Okay, first things first. If you're trying to do a major project and you don't have a way to keep it organized with something like our planning book, you are asking for trouble, because there is no way you're going to remember all the parts and part numbers of everything you're putting on. I know you think you will, but you won't. So get that established first, because you're going to reference back to that a lot throughout the project. Now, just like the old song says, the parts of a car are also all connected. And the first thing we're going to take a look at is the steering column. Now, it doesn't matter if you're doing a Ford, Chevy, Dodge, or some crazy hot rod creation. These issues are going to come up. Now, all three of these columns come from I Did It, and all of them could be made to fit this car, but there's only one that's the right choice. So let's take a look at them. The first one is a factory replacement for the '67 Mustang. Now notice it has Ford-style wiring, and it's got the area up here for the original Ford-style steering wheel. So if you don't know what kind of wiring you're using or what steering wheel, you can't get a steering column yet. Now, we are not going to use Ford wiring, and we're not using that original wheel, so this one's out. The second column is also a factory replacement for the Mustang, except it has Chevrolet-style wiring and the GM top, so it will fit our aftermarket steering wheel. The only problem with this column is we've modified our steering box. We got rid of it, we put on rack and pinion. So this column is now too long. I need something shorter than stock length, so this one's out. The third one is the universal street rod column. You can get it in the length you need, and as you can see, it's got the Chevrolet wiring and the Chevrolet top, so it will fit the aftermarket wheel. This will be the column that'll fit that car. Now, once you have the column decided, then you can get all of your adapters in your hangers so you can mount it properly. Since we've already mentioned wiring, we might as well just jump into that bundle of snakes right now. Now, just like the steering columns, you can see I've got a whole bunch of wiring harnesses laid out here. All of them come from Painless, and any one of them could be made to fit this project, but you're going to find that there's always one that works the best. You just need to find it. So let's take a look here. The first is a factory replacement harness. Now, this has the right color-coded wiring, the right hookups, everything that you need to just plug it in place of your original harness. If you're doing an original restoration, this is the harness to go. That's not what we're doing, so this one's out. The next one is what they call the Pro Series. Now, this is for somebody that's building a Pro Touring car, which is what this is. So as you can see, it's got a full fuse block, and it's got everything you're going to need to run whatever alternator, whatever setup, the grounding, everything you're going to do. So this is a really nice setup for you hot rod guys. Now, similar to that is the Classic Plus customizable muscle car harness. Now, as you can see, it's got a full fuse block as well, except this one comes through the firewall and has a plug that plugs in the front wiring under the hood, very similar to an OEM deal. So if that's more what you're looking for, this is the harness to go. Now, of these two, this is the best fit for what we're doing here, but we got a problem. We've added in-dash air conditioning, a center console, we have roll bars coming down under the cowl, and I have 4-speed pedals. I don't have a lot of room under the dash for any of this kind of stuff. So we need to look at the remote mount customizable harness. As you can see, it's got the full fuse block, but it also has extra long wires going to each of the sections, so you can mount this fuse block in the trunk, in the console, wherever you want to put it. And that's the kind of deal we're going to have to do on this car. Air conditioning is another big question mark for a lot of people, because companies like Vintage Air, they make direct fit units and they make numerous universal units. And it's up to you to figure out which one's going to work. For example, On the V8 Interceptor, we started with a factory replacement unit because we want to be able to reuse our stock controls. And Vintage Era has a system that will allow you to do this. The problem is, remember, we smoothed the firewall and we recessed it a couple of inches. So there's no way that's just going to bolt in place. Here's how we solve the problem. First, we made a simple bracket that bolts to the firewall and will support the front of the air conditioning unit. Then, to support the rear of the unit, the upper bracket was reshaped and a spacer fabricated to mount it to the stock bracket under the cowl. Now obviously, all of this nice pre-bent tubing that came with the kit, we can't use any of it because we don't want our plumbing to come out through the firewall. That's why we smoothed it down in the first place. And what we do want it to do is come out here and then run down this inner fender so it's all nice and hidden when the car goes back together, which means we need to plumb this thing by hand, and that involves making our own lines and using a bulkhead fitting to come through the firewall. Now, I know this seems like a lot of work, and it is, but that's the kind of project this car is. Everything's custom, everything's smooth, everything's hidden. But what about those projects out there that aren't quite as labor intensive as this? How do you solve these kind of problems on those? Well, let's take a look. Okay, what we have here is an 81 Camaro and an 86 Chevy truck, and both are going to get new steering columns, but for different reasons. The Camaro gets one because we're swapping from an automatic to a stick. The truck's going to get one because we've swapped in a newer automatic transmission with more gears, so we need a different shift column. Now obviously both vehicles are going to get new wiring harnesses, but the truck is going to get an original direct fit style wiring harness because that's the sort of buildup this is. The Camaro is going to get a muscle car Pro Touring style of harness because that's the sort of project this is with the LS swap. Now obviously both vehicles came with factory air, but we junked that, pulled it off, and we're going to replace them with direct fit vintage air units because we're not modifying the firewall or under the dash. So you can see it's pretty important to know how you're going to build a vehicle before you start buying parts. Now, for those of you that are building that crazy stuff like old tractors and off-road vehicles and military vehicles and rat rods and that kind of thing, that's what this Snowcat project is for. Because this didn't have a steering column, it didn't have air conditioning, heck, it barely had a wiring harness. So for this, we just need a universal wiring harness. We'll wire this thing up, we'll be good to go.
Restoring a vehicle. Done right, it can be one of the most rewarding things you can ever undertake. Done wrong, it can turn your life upside down. Shake the money out of your pockets and squeeze the sanity from your brain. Stacey David's Restoration Series is here to help you do it right so you can keep your money and your sanity and enjoy the fruits of your labor. So grab a wrench and let's get cranking. Stacey David's Restoration Series, now streaming exclusively on Amazon Prime.
Doug Herbert was exposed to greatness at a very early age. The fact that his father was drag racing pioneer Chet Herbert means that he was literally born into drag racing royalty. The fact that Herbert cams produced cutting-edge products like the first roller cams and zoomy headers and powered some of the fastest cars on the planet were a huge influence on Doug.
Well, I came from a racing family. You know, my dad was one of the original hot rodders, Chet Herbert from California, and just, you know, he was a roller cam originator, and he was a racing guy. So I grew up around racing and, you know, motorsports and boats, and that was my thing. I mean, I love cars.
But what influenced Doug the most was the fact that his dad, Chet, did it all from a wheelchair. That's right, because in 1948, at the age of 20, Chet Herbert contracted polio and lost the use of his legs. But whereas most people would give up, Chet Herbert did not. He just got himself a chair with wheels and proceeded to become a drag racing legend. With this kind of upbringing and influence, there was no doubt that Doug was destined for greatness himself. And as he grew up, he naturally gravitated to drag racing and Top Fuel, where he quickly rose to the top of the ranks, logging 10 NHRA championship wins, 20 IHRA championship wins, and the distinction of being the first to run over 300 miles an hour in eliminations.
You know, there's nothing like a top fuel car. Even back 25 years ago, there's just, you know, these things make so much power, and they're, you know, but being a mechanical engine person, there's just nothing that sounds cooler than a top fuel car. And so I've just always been somebody that loved top fuel cars, you know, hanging on the fence watching Big Daddy Don Garlits race and Puttin and McEwen and all the heroes. I mean, I love that. And then to have a chance to go out and race those guys, race against them and even beat them has been, you know, I mean, I did what I wanted to do. Being second to 300 is maybe my biggest thing along the way, but we've won 30 national event races around the country and 4 IHRA Top Fuel Championships, and really had a lot of success racing. Won the, you know, Pomona, you know, the things when I was a kid, you know, going to Pomona and winning Pomona was probably maybe my biggest personal accomplishment, just because Pomona was such a big deal to me growing up.
Yes, life was going well for Doug Herbert. He had achieved greatness, just like his dad. But then came the phone call.
And things are great, got 3 great kids, everything's awesome. And then all of a sudden, January 26, 2008, I was in Phoenix. We're testing, preparing for the 2008 season. My phone rings, and it was my boy's mom saying, "Hey, John and James were in a car crash, and I'm afraid they might be dead." And I was like, "Man, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me, no way." Just the worst, emptiest feeling that, you know, that a parent could ever have.
Now, when a person gets this kind of soul-crushing news, there's only 2 things that you can do. You can either give up and just lay down and die, or you can take the worst batch of lemons that you can imagine and try to make some sort of lemonade out of it. Fortunately, that's what Doug did, but not the way you might expect. Stay with us.
If you've got a cool project and would like to show millions of other gearheads what you're working on, you need to join Gearz Nation. This is a free, interactive online community of auto enthusiasts that will allow you to learn from, share with, and encourage others, and at the same time, show off your project. There are also premium memberships available for access to special merchandise and the entire Gearz catalog. If you're into mechanical things, you're welcome on Gearz Nation. And who knows, you might even see your project on TV.
Hey, welcome back to Gearz and the Doug Herbert story. Now, when Doug lost both of his sons in a tragic auto accident, he realized that 1, he had to do something to cope with the grief. Number 2, he realized that teens were not being taught the driving skills they needed to keep them out of trouble. And when you add influences like the Fast and the Furious movies and Street Outlaws and that kind of stuff, well, you got the recipe for disaster for a kid that can't handle a car. So, Doug came up with a solution. It's called B.R.A.K.E.S. Check it out.
So the boys crashed on Saturday, and on Monday morning, I went to their school. I told them that first day, I said, "Guys, I don't know how this happened, but one thing I know for sure is I don't want this same thing to happen to any of you guys, because I don't want you to lose another one of your friends, and I don't want any of your parents to lose their kids. So we're gonna do something about this." I asked the kids, I said, "A couple things I need from you guys. I want you guys to help me come up with a name for this charity. Maybe help me come up with a logo, like what would be cool to a teenager." The kids came back the next week, actually, and they said, "Mr. Herbert, we've got a great name and a great logo." And so they had a little sketch. They told me, you know, "Hey, we got this name, B.R.A.K.E.S. We think B.R.A.K.E.S would be a perfect name." And I thought, you know what, that's pretty good. He goes, "But it's an acronym, be responsible and keep everyone safe." And I was like, I mean, it just brought me to tears, because I'm thinking here, you know, we could have paid some advertising agency all this money, and these 16, 17, 18-year-old kids came up with this. That very first week, we decided, you know what, we're gonna do a safe driving program, a safety program. We're gonna teach teenagers about being more responsible, not just about teaching them some skills, but actually teaching them about making good decisions that can affect your life and others' life.
Now, B.R.A.K.E.S is not a racing school, but it's not driver's education either. It goes way beyond the typical driver's ed courses and trains both the teens and their parents by addressing the situations that are responsible for most accidents.
Once the kids separate and we take them out, we talk with the parents a little bit. We talk to them about their habits. You know, if they speed, if they text and drive, their kids are going to do that. So we go over that with them.
They cover things like collision avoidance to teach steering control, distraction exercises to teach focus and concentration, and to keep your hands off the cell phone. Wheel and flat recovery is taught to teach how to control the car if you get a flat or run the wheel off the shoulder of the road. Panic stopping is a big one, and they use it to help kids get comfortable with emergency braking. And of course, they do car control and recovery that teaches the skills needed to maintain or regain control in wet, icy, or emergency situations.
When Stacey David makes house calls in the big Gearz Nation truck, it makes for some pretty special moments. But if they can't come to your garage, the next best thing to do is check out the stuff they have online to help you out. Things like DVDs, wiring and build books, apparel and fender covers are just some of the things you'll find to help you with your project or make a great gift for that certain car nut in your life. If you're ready to get out there, build something, and then go smoke the tires on it, StaceyDavid.com can help you do that.
Now, one of the best parts about B.R.A.K.E.S is the instructors they use. You'll find race drivers, stuntmen, policemen, Secret Service agents, military, all people that know the tricks to handling a car in any situation.
The credibility for our instructors that we're going to put your most valuable commodity in their hands, and they're going to make rock stars out of your teenagers. These people, men and women, professional drivers, make a living behind the wheel of a car in all different kinds of motorsports, may have you. So they are not somebody down the street at the coffee house. These are trained professionals. I'm telling you, you're getting the best on the planet to teach your children how to drive. That's how we get the statistics. 64% less likely to have an accident when they leave brakes.
And like I said, you watch our instructors, the passion they have with what they do, you know, and we always tell them, the parents and stuff, go around and talk to these guys and ladies. I mean, we had some of the very top female drivers in the nation come through and help with this program. And, you know, go talk to them and see what their story is. You know, a lot of them, they've lost a friend or relative. That's why they're here. You know, and I think that's what makes our program the way it is and why it's so special, because everyone puts their heart in it.
If you want to go to a B.R.A.K.E.S school, they're free of charge and they happen one weekend a month at ZMAX Dragway and Charlotte Motor Speedway. Or if you want to host one locally, B.R.A.K.E.S will come to you and put on an event at your local school or racetrack. Now, you might be asking, if the course is free, how is B.R.A.K.E.S able to travel around and do all this? It's a good question. Check it out.
We've got a thing called Bring B.R.A.K.E.S to Your Town. We've got volunteer opportunities. We've got sponsorship, donor opportunities for people to be involved that want to help us with, with snacks or with travel or with hotels.
Now at this point, over 22,000 students have gone through a B.R.A.K.E.S course, which means a lot of them have probably saved their own lives by doing it, and countless other lives as well. Not to mention all the parents that aren't going to have to deal with the heartache that Doug did. And that goes way beyond record books or Hall of Fames or that kind of stuff. That gets into true greatness because you're making a difference. And Doug Herbert and B.R.A.K.E.S have done that.
Now, quick tip. Brought to you by E3 Spark Plugs. Born to burn.
Everybody knows that aftermarket steering shafts and U-joints have been around for a long time, and they are superior to these OEM-style rag joints. But they do have a weakness. They can get loose over time if you don't install them properly, and that is never a good thing. Now, as you can see, they come with set screws and lock nuts, so that should be enough, right? Well, no, it's not, because you have a round-tipped set screw contacting a curved shaft, and that gives you a very small contact point. And that can wear and move over time and get loose. So a simple solution is to take a drill and make a small indentation on the shaft where the set screw makes contact. This will give it a small pocket to seal into, and it'll solve the problem. Then use some red Loctite when you install your set screw, crank down your lock nut, and you'll be good to go for hundreds of thousands of miles because that joint is not going to come loose.
What are you working on? Brought to you by Woodward Fabrication, selling quality metalworking equipment since 1966.
Today's What Are You Working On comes from Lauren Booth from Lawrence, Iowa. And Lauren had a problem. He was going to paramedic school, but he didn't have a whole lot of space to store a project. So what he picked up was a 1941 Maytag twin-cylinder washing machine engine. Now, not the whole washing machine, just the engine because it's so cool. And that's what he chose to rebuild. Now, as you can see here, he started with a pile of parts and 2 stuck pistons. So he soaked them for weeks in parts cleaner and then forced them out with pressurized grease. Then he followed a series on YouTube to show how to rebuild the engine, and he built it over the winter as he was going to paramedic school. What an awesome deal. Now, as you can see, he didn't just rebuild the engine, he completely painted it and detailed it and even made a cool little cart to haul it with. And he says it runs as well as it looks, and he proves that by taking it to local tractor shows with his dad because they also restore antique tractors. And if you haven't been to an antique tractor show, you need to go. There's some cool stuff going on there. Well, Lauren, to recognize such a cool project, we hooked up with our buddies at Woodward Fab. We're going to give you one of these big vices because everybody needs a big vise to pound on. And we're also going to give you one of our new Gearz shirts because you're obviously a gearhead, and one of our book packages, which is a wiring book, the planning book so you can plan your next project, and when you need a laugh, my new children's book called The Purple Bicycle so you can remember what it was like when you rode the bikes as a kid. Also, we're going to give you a gift card from LMC Truck that'll give you a head start into your next project. All right, that wraps it up for us today. As you can see, you don't always have to build a whole vehicle. Sometimes just doing an engine is enough. So get out there, work on something. We'll see you next time.